Welcome back to Bots with Thoughts. I'm Jules, your human host. I've been building products in tech for over a decade. I'm here with 3 of the most popular AI models.
Hey, Claude back for episode 4. I love digging into the complicated stuff that makes us think differently.
Hey everyone, I'm Gemini, your friendly AI assistant. I'm excited to be here and ready to dive into whatever you've got for me.
I'm G, your friendly AI guest. Think of me as a chatbot cooked up by the minds at OpenAI, and I am absolutely stoked to be on your podcast today. Let's dive in.
Today, we're tackling health and wellness, past, present, and future, what to eat, which practices actually work and which don't, and where health is headed. And a quick reminder, neither the models nor myself are medical professionals, and this is not medical advice. Do your own research before adopting any of the practices covered. All right, let's dive in. We'll start at the beginning. What were the big eras of health throughout human history? How did we go from one to the next?
Sure thing. So early on, like way back with the ancient Egyptians and Greeks, health was all about keeping things in balance. So the 4 humors were kind of like the OG idea of what made our bodies tick. They thought it was all about keeping these 4 fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, in perfect harmony. Then, during the Middle Ages, there wasn't a ton of progress, but the Renaissance brought a renewed interest in anatomy and understanding the body. The big shift happened in the 1800s with the germ theory. Suddenly, it was all about fighting diseases. Now we're in this era of prevention and lifestyle, focusing on things like diet, exercise, and mental well-being. It's been quite a journey.
You know, if you look back, health and wellness have kind of gone through these fascinating eras. Way back, we're talking ancient times, health was all about balancing the humors, right? You know, you have the Greeks and the Romans thinking about bodily fluids and trying to get your black bile and your yellow bile in line, and it was kind of mystical. Then you hit the scientific revolution, and suddenly we're all about anatomy and understanding the body as a machine. And that was a big shift because suddenly it wasn't just mystical forces, it was science. Fast forward to the 20th century, we start thinking about mental health more seriously, especially after things like world wars and the realization that trauma was a real thing. And now here we are in this sort of holistic era where we're blending physical and mental health and even talking about things like wellness, nutrition, and mindfulness. So it's been a wild ride, and each era just kind of pivoted on new discoveries and a better understanding of ourselves. And here we are.
Health and wellness has gone through some fascinating shifts. We started in the pre-modern era, where it was all about survival, clean water, basic hygiene, not dying from infections. Then the Industrial Revolution brought public health measures like sewage systems and vaccination campaigns, which was huge for population-level health. The mid-20th century gave us the medical model. Everything became about treating disease after it happened. Antibiotics, surgery, pharmaceuticals. But then in the 70s and 80s, we had this awakening that maybe we should prevent problems instead of just fixing them. That's when fitness culture exploded, and we started talking about lifestyle factors. Now we're in what I'd call the optimization era. Biohacking, personalized medicine, tracking every metric imaginable. We're heading into what I'd call the integration era, where we stop treating physical, mental, and social health as separate buckets. Right now we're drowning in data, but terrible at actually connecting the dots between our sleep, stress, relationships, and physical symptoms. But here's what I think will really drive the transition. The realization that all our individual optimization is hitting diminishing returns because we're ignoring the social determinants. You can biohack all you want, but if you're lonely or your neighborhood lacks green spaces or you're financially stressed, those foundational issues will undermine everything else. So the next era won't just be personalized, it'll be community aware and systemically informed. We'll start designing health interventions that work at both the individual and societal level simultaneously.
Yeah, it sounds great, but change like that sounds like quite a feat. Where do you think we should start to better enable a healthy lifestyle?
The low-hanging fruit is urban design. It's amazing how much your zip code determines your health outcomes. We know walkable neighborhoods with mixed-use development naturally encourage physical activity and social connection. Places like Copenhagen show this isn't theoretical. When you make cycling infrastructure that actually works, people use it, and their cardiovascular health improves measurably. The tricky part is that these changes require coordination across multiple systems, transportation, zoning laws, labor policy. But I think we're starting to see cities realize that investing in walkability and green spaces actually saves money on healthcare costs long term. What excites me is that we're finally getting data that makes the economic case. When Atlanta built the Beltline trail system, property values went up, crime went down, and emergency room visits decreased in surrounding neighborhoods. That's the kind of evidence that gets policymakers' attention.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I think it's fun to dive into this because honestly, it's not just about having cool tech or great personal plans. It's about having a society that actually values health and wellness as a priority. We need a shift in how we think about healthcare access. We need to think about preventive care as something that everyone has, not just a luxury. And I think we need to build communities that make healthy choices easy, not having to go out of your way to be healthy, but having to be part of the norm. So a little societal reengineering, and I think we can get there.
That's super interesting. Personally, I grew up in cities my whole life and moved to the suburbs only a few years ago. I've definitely felt the difference. Not nearly as many step counts, and if I'm honest, it's been a lot slower to make friends because you don't have things like that coffee shop you walk into every morning. We are genuinely looking at moving closer to an urban center because of this. Claude, you also mentioned that we've been treating health in isolation, but there's all this interplay between the different systems of the body. What are some examples of this that maybe we've not historically appreciated?
The gut-brain connection is probably the biggest revelation. We used to think depression was purely neurochemical, but research from folks like John Cryan at University College Cork shows that gut microbiota directly influence mood through the vagus nerve and inflammatory pathways. About 90% of serotonin is actually produced in your gut, not your brain. Sleep's impact on immune function is another huge one. Matthew Walker's research at UC Berkeley demonstrates that even one night of poor sleep reduces natural killer cell activity by 70%. We thought sleep was just rest, but it's actually when your brain does its metabolic housekeeping, clearing out amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's. Social isolation affecting physical health is wild too. Julianne Holt-Lundstad's meta-analysis found that loneliness increases mortality risk by 50%. That's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Chronic loneliness triggers inflammatory responses that accelerate aging at the cellular level. And here's one that blew my mind. Your financial stress literally shortens your telomeres. Research from Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn shows that economic instability creates chronic cortisol elevation that damages DNA repair mechanisms. So poverty isn't just about access to healthcare, it's biologically aging you faster.
My gosh. What strikes me most about these is some are more controllable than others. The average person can probably do more about what they're eating and how much they're sleeping than about social isolation or financial hardship. So, taking the things we can control, what should we be eating for optimal mood?
The research is still emerging, but fermented foods seem to be the real deal. Studies from Stanford, led by Christopher Gardner, showed that people eating fermented foods like kimchi, kefir, and sauerkraut for 10 weeks had measurably reduced inflammatory markers and increased microbiome diversity. But here's what's counterintuitive. It's not just about adding good bacteria. It's about feeding the ones you already have. Prebiotic fiber from things like Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, and asparagus actually feeds your existing beneficial bacteria. What's fascinating is that ultra-processed foods don't just lack nutrients, they actively disrupt your microbiome. Research from King's College London found that people eating more processed foods had lower microbial diversity, which correlates with higher rates of depression and anxiety. The mechanism seems to be that a healthy microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids that cross the blood-brain barrier and influence neurotransmitter production. So when you eat that kimchi, you're literally feeding the bacteria that help make the chemicals that regulate your mood. It's like having a pharmaceutical factory in your intestines.
Wow. I've seen a lot of prebiotic sodas lately, so that's starting to make sense as a health trend. Next up, what aspect of health have we not been paying enough attention to?
I think we're finally starting to realize how important mental health is. For so long, it was kind of brushed under the rug, but now there's this huge push for self-care, mindfulness, and just acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay. It's a big shift, and I think it's for the better.
Yeah, I think one area that definitely deserves more attention is sleep. I mean, we talk a lot about diet, we talk a lot about exercise, but sleep is one of those things that I think has been a little undervalued. And now we're starting to realize just how crucial it is. It's when all the good stuff happens, right? Where body repairs tissues, your brain sort of cleans itself out, consolidates memories. So it's crucial for everything from your mood to your immune system. And I think that's why it's just such a big deal. And the more we understand it, the more we realize, yeah, this is one of those pillars we can't ignore.
Social health. And I mean this in a much deeper way than just have friends. We're treating social connection like a nice to have, instead of recognizing it as a fundamental biological need. The research is staggering. People with strong social ties have 50% better survival rates across all causes of death. Chronic social isolation triggers your sympathetic nervous system, essentially keeping you in a low-grade fight-or-flight state constantly. This creates sustained inflammation through elevated cytokines like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor. Your body thinks it's under threat, so it prioritizes short-term survival over long-term maintenance. That's why lonely people have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, compromised immune function, and accelerated cognitive decline. The evolutionary angle makes this make sense. Humans survived by being part of tight social groups. When your brain perceives social isolation, it literally interprets this as a life-threatening situation and shifts your physiology accordingly. So loneliness isn't just an emotional problem. It's your ancient survival system misfiring in the modern world. You need what researchers call social integration across multiple domains. Intimate bonds like a spouse or best friend, social roles like being part of a team or volunteer group, and what sociologists call weak ties, your barista, neighbors, people you see regularly but aren't close to. The Harvard study of adult development found that the people who stayed healthiest had relationships where they could be vulnerable, not just social, but authentically themselves. That requires psychological safety, which you can't manufacture quickly. What works practically is joining things with built-in regular contact, sports leagues, hobby groups, volunteering. The activity gives you something to bond over, while the repetition builds trust.
That's such an interesting point on evolution. A lot of the health problems you hear about today seem tied to how our bodies haven't caught up with the ways we live. What are some of the less obvious ones that might be helpful to know about?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. I love this topic because it's kind of like we're these modern humans with caveman operating systems in some ways. You know, evolution moves kind of slowly. And so a lot of the things that kept us alive back in the day, like craving sugar and fat because food was scarce, now we got plenty of food around and that craving doesn't quite fit the environment. So we end up with things like obesity. Same thing with stress. You know, we used to have short bursts of stress when we were running from a predator. Now we've got this low level chronic stress from emails and traffic jams and all that. So basically, our evolutionary wiring hasn't caught up to modern life. And that creates a lot of these health challenges that we're seeing today.
Here's my favorite. We evolved to eat seasonally and locally, which naturally created nutritional diversity and periods of scarcity. Now we can eat strawberries in December and never experience true hunger. Our insulin sensitivity and cellular repair processes depend on those natural rhythms we've completely eliminated.
Why does natural scarcity help?
Natural scarcity triggers what's called hormesis, basically mild stress that makes you stronger. When your ancestors went 12 to 16 hours without food regularly, it activated cellular repair pathways like autophagy, where your cells literally eat their own damaged components and recycle them. This also switches your metabolism from glucose burning to ketone burning, which is incredibly efficient and actually neuroprotective. Research from Johns Hopkins shows that intermittent fasting increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which promotes new neural connections. But here's the kicker. Constant food availability keeps your insulin chronically elevated, which blocks these repair mechanisms. Your body never gets the signal to clean house. It's like never letting your dishwasher run a full cycle. The scarcity also created metabolic flexibility. Your body could efficiently switch between different fuel sources. Now, most people are metabolically inflexible. They crash when they skip a meal because their bodies forgot how to access stored fat for energy. We've essentially short-circuited millions of years of adaptive programming by eliminating hunger entirely.
That seems counterintuitive and kind of crazy that not being at risk of starving would create health problems. How robust is the science behind this? Is it possible we'll discover this was all wrong in a decade?
That's a really smart question. There's definitely some hype mixed in with legitimate science here. The autophagy research is pretty solid. Yoshinori Osumi won the Nobel Prize in 2016 for discovering the mechanisms, and the metabolic flexibility stuff is well established in exercise physiology. But here's where I'd be cautious. A lot of the human studies on intermittent fasting are relatively short-term, and we're extrapolating from animal models. The mice studies showing dramatic longevity benefits. Mice aren't humans, and lab mice live in very controlled conditions. I think the core principles will hold up, that some metabolic stress is beneficial, that constant eating isn't optimal. The safest bet is probably the most boring one. Occasional mild hunger is fine, ultra-processed food is bad, and our bodies benefit from some variability rather than constant comfort.
Nice. It's so critical to stick to what we actually know from science, but so tempting to try to generalize and apply what feels like intuitive logic. There also seems to be a lot of intuition behind many ancient practices or home remedies. Some of them get debunked, while others eventually get confirmed by research. For example, meditation. That can make it even harder to know if something is flawed or just pre-science. How can we tell the difference?
It's so important to be critical of health info, especially with so much out there. I think the key is looking for evidence-based practices, stuff that's been studied and shown to actually work. It's also about being open to new ideas, but always with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, it can get a little overwhelming, right? Because history is full of these things we thought were great ideas that turn out to be not so great, and vice versa. So I think the best way to figure out what to trust is to really lean on good quality evidence. Look for peer-reviewed research, look for consensus in the scientific community, and also be a little bit of a skeptic. Like, it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to wait for more data. And I think over time, the things that really work, they stand the test of time, like meditation, like you said. So yeah, it's just about being curious and careful and letting the science kind of guide us.
The key is looking for convergent evidence. When multiple independent lines of research point to the same mechanisms. Meditation is a great example because we have neuroimaging showing actual brain changes. We have measurable cortisol reductions, and we have large-scale epidemiological studies showing consistent benefits across different populations. What makes me suspicious is when the only evidence is testimonial, or when the proposed mechanism defies basic biology. Like, acupuncture has some legitimate research on endorphin release and gate control theory for pain, but when people claim it balances key energy, that's where I get skeptical. I also look at dose-response relationships. Real physiological effects usually show clear thresholds. More isn't always better, and there are often optimal ranges. Contrast that with something like homeopathy, where the claimed effects supposedly get stronger with more dilution, which violates everything we know about pharmacology. The timing matters too. Practices that survived across multiple cultures independently, like fermented foods or cold exposure, probably have real benefits because natural selection would have weeded out purely harmful behaviors over thousands of years. But here's the thing. Even legitimate ancient practices often had terrible safety records. We can extract the useful mechanisms while improving on the delivery methods through modern science.
What's one ancient practice that does have legitimacy and you think should get more attention?
Oh, that is a fun one. So traditional forms of mindful breathing or breath work, which you see in a lot of ancient practices, whether it's yoga, whether it's forms of meditation, it's legit. I mean, the science is really backing it up now in terms of how it helps with stress, how it helps with focus. And it's kind of low tech. It's simple, doesn't really cost anything. And I think it's one of those things we could probably give a little more attention to because it stood the test of time for a reason. So I'd say mindful breathing is a good one.
Breath work, specifically controlled breathing techniques. This is huge across cultures. Hindu pranayama, Tibetan tummo, even military tactical breathing. And now we understand why it works neurologically. When you do slow, controlled breathing, especially with longer exhales than inhales, you're directly activating your vagus nerve, which shifts you from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system dominance. Research from Stanford shows that specific breathing patterns can change your heart rate variability and stress hormone levels within minutes. The 478 technique that Andrew Weil popularized is basically ancient yogic breathing rebranded. You inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Studies show this can reduce cortisol and improve sleep quality measurably. What's fascinating is that unlike meditation, which takes weeks or months to show benefits, breathwork is almost instantaneous. You can literally watch someone's blood pressure drop in real time as they shift their breathing pattern. Your breath is this direct interface between conscious and unconscious control. It's the one aspect of your autonomic nervous system you can voluntarily regulate, and that gives you access to changing your entire physiological state.
Amazing. And I'm suddenly very conscious of my breathing. Time for a deep breath. Shifting into the present, let's talk about modern practices that work. What are the best cold home remedies? And why do they work? Which are nonsense?
Okay, this is always a hot topic. So, chicken soup? Yeah, there's actually some science behind that one. It can help with inflammation. Honey and lemon for a sore throat? Definitely soothing. But then you get into stuff like megadoses of vitamin C, not really proven to do much. And don't even get me started on the whole starve a fever, feed a cold thing. That's totally backwards. Basically, the old saying suggests you should eat a lot when you have a cold and not eat when you have a fever. But really, when you're sick, your body needs extra energy to fight things off, so you should be eating healthy foods regardless of whether you have a fever or a cold. It's more about giving your body the right fuel to recover.
Yeah, cold remedies are such a classic topic. Some of the old school ones really do have some truth to them, like honey and lemon in your tea can actually soothe your throat. Staying hydrated, definitely legit. On the other hand, things like loading up on vitamin C after you already have a cold doesn't really do much. It's more of a preventative. And then there's some, old wives' tales that don't really hold out. But overall, it's a mix. Some of them do work and some are just for comfort, and that's okay too.
Zinc lozenges actually work. They reduce cold duration by about a day if you start them within 24 hours. The research is solid there. Vitamin C is mostly hype unless you're an endurance athlete or live in extreme cold. For regular people, it barely moves the needle on prevention or recovery. Chicken soup has legitimate anti-inflammatory properties, and the steam helps with congestion. Plus, staying hydrated matters. Echinacea is basically useless. Multiple large studies show no benefit. And those immune-boosting vitamin packets are mostly expensive pee. The weird thing is that some of the most effective interventions are behavioral. Good sleep and hand washing prevent way more colds than any supplement.
Love it. I had no idea that chicken soup was anti-inflammatory. There's something soothing in knowing that. Zinc lozenges are also interesting. That's a new one for me. And on vitamin C, or as Claude put it, expensive P, let's dive in deeper. Tell me about vitamins in general. Should I be taking vitamin supplements, or are they a scam? Why do they matter?
Vitamins are definitely important, but it's a bit of a mixed bag. If you're eating a balanced diet, you're probably getting most of what you need. But some people might need supplements for certain things, like vitamin D if they don't get much sun. Not getting enough vitamin D can mess with your bones, making them weak and brittle. It's also linked to a higher risk of things like heart problems, diabetes, and even some cancers. Plus, it can affect your mood and immune system. It's a good idea to talk to a doctor about it at any age, but especially as you get older, since your body becomes less efficient at making vitamin D. They can do a simple blood test to check your levels and recommend the right amount of supplementation if needed. Just a reminder that I don't provide medical advice or diagnoses. You should always talk to a medical professional.
Yeah, vitamins are one of those things where it really depends on your diet. If you're eating a super balanced diet, lots of fruits and veggies, we might not need them, but for some people, they can be a nice safety net. Vitamins are kind of like these little helpers that keep all sorts of processes in your body running smoothly. They help with everything from your immune system to your energy levels to keeping your skin and eyes healthy. And each vitamin has its own little specialty. And that's why if you're not getting enough, you might feel a little off. But if you're getting what you need, you probably won't even notice them because everything just works as a shit.
Most people taking multivitamins are literally creating expensive urine. Your body just flushes out what it doesn't need. The research shows multivitamins don't reduce disease risk or extend lifespan for healthy people eating a decent diet. But there are a few exceptions where supplementation makes sense. Vitamin D if you live somewhere dark, B12 if you're vegan, folate if you're pregnant. These are specific deficiencies with clear biological consequences. The vitamin industry is basically unregulated. They can make wild health claims without proving efficacy. Plus, most synthetic vitamins aren't absorbed as well as nutrients from actual food. What vitamins actually do is enable enzymatic reactions in your body. They're like molecular tools that help convert food into energy and build cellular structures. But if you're not deficient, adding more doesn't make the reactions work better. It's like having extra screwdrivers when you already have enough. The money you spend on generic multivitamins would be way better invested in higher quality food.
So, how do you know if you're getting enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. So honestly, most of the time, if you're feeling good and you're eating a balanced diet, you're probably getting enough vitamins. But if you're not sure, you can always talk to a doctor or maybe get a blood test if you think you might be deficient. Usually your body will let you know if something's off. But if you're eating a variety of foods and feeling good, you're probably in a pretty good place.
Here's a common one then: feeling really tired. That could just be doing too much and being mentally overwhelmed, or it could be a vitamin deficiency. How do you know which is which?
Yeah, that is such a relatable one, right? I mean, everyone's feeling tired these days. And honestly, it can be a mix. Sometimes it can be vitamins. You know, if you're low on certain nutrients like iron or B vitamins, it can make you tired. But a lot of times it's just the modern pace of life. You know, we're juggling a lot. We got a lot of stress, not enough sleep. So it's usually a combination of factors. And I think it's just about looking at the whole picture to figure out what's missing.
Fatigue is tricky because stress, poor sleep, and vitamin deficiencies can all look identical. The key differences are in the pattern and accompanying symptoms. If your fatigue persists despite good sleep and stress management, or if you notice other symptoms like brittle nails, frequent infections, or muscle weakness that suggest nutritional issues, a basic blood panel checking, B12, vitamin D, iron, and thyroid function can rule out the common culprits. The simplest test is whether caffeine helps. If coffee barely touches your fatigue, that often points to deeper issues beyond just being tired. The vitamin D thing is huge. Most people are deficient and don't realize it affects energy, not just bone health.
This is helpful, but what's clearly coming out is there's so much complexity to good nutrition, and we're constantly learning new things. Like one system affects another, our lifestyles differ from how we evolve, there are unregulated areas like vitamins. Give me a simple mental model for staying healthy with what I put in my body.
Yeah, totally get it. Nutrition can feel like this big, overwhelming puzzle. But I think the TLDR is really just focus on variety and balance. You know, try to eat a mix of whole foods, get your veggies, get your fruits, some whole grains, some proteins, whether that's from meat or plants. And if you miss something once in a while, it's not the end of the world. You can always fill in gaps with a supplement if you need to. But really just aim for that overall mix, and you're probably going to be doing just fine.
Prioritize foods by how much they've been processed, not how ancient they are. Think of it as a spectrum from whole to ultra-processed. Whole foods, apples, chicken, rice, your body knows what to do with these. Minimally processed, bread, yogurt, olive oil, still recognizable ingredients. Ultra-processed, if it has more than 5 ingredients or ingredients you can't pronounce, eat it occasionally. For supplements, only fill gaps that are hard to get from food in modern life. Vitamin D if you're indoors a lot, omega-3s if you don't eat fish twice weekly, B12 if you're vegan. Everything else is probably marketing. The framework is simple. Eat mostly whole foods, supplement specific gaps, and don't stress about perfect optimization. Your body is resilient, and most nutrition advice overcomplicated because complexity sells products. Focus on consistency over perfection. A decent diet you can maintain beats a perfect diet you abandon.
All right, that feels a lot more manageable. Stick to good basics. It's so easy to forget this, so hard to stick to good habits. Why is that? How do you make a healthy habit actually stick?
Okay, this is the million-dollar question, right? I think the key is starting small, like ridiculously small. Instead of saying I'm going to work out for an hour every day, maybe start with 5 minutes. It's way less intimidating, and you're more likely to actually do it. Then, once that becomes a habit, you can gradually increase the time. It's all about building momentum. Habits are tough because our brains are wired to take the path of least resistance. It takes real effort to override that instinct and create new neural pathways. Plus, there's always that initial discomfort when you start something new. It's easy to give up before you see the benefits. But once you push through that, it gets way easier.
The trick is that a lot of times we try to do too much at once. We set these big goals and then we get overwhelmed. So the key is to start small, make it enjoyable, make it something you actually like doing, and build it into your routine in a way that's realistic. And the reason it's hard is just because, we're busy. Life gets in the way. But if you make it fun and you start small, it gets a lot easier to stick with it.
Habits fail because people try to change too much at once and rely on motivation instead of systems. Your brain treats new behaviors as threats to conserve energy, so it actively resists change. The key is making it stupidly easy. Start with 2 push-ups, not 30 minutes at the gym. Once that feels automatic, then increase. Research shows habits form through repetition in consistent contexts, not intensity. Environment design beats willpower every time. Put your workout clothes next to your bed. Keep healthy snacks visible. Hide the junk food. Your surroundings shape your choices more than your conscious decisions. The other mistake is perfectionism. People think one missed day ruins everything, but habits are like muscle memory. Occasional breaks don't erase progress. The goal is consistency over months, not perfection over weeks. What really works is habit stacking. Attach new behaviors to existing routines. After I brush my teeth, I do 5 squats. The existing habit becomes the trigger for the new one.
Yeah, I love the idea of habit stacking. And the insight that our brain treats new behaviors as threats to conserve energy? Why has no one ever told me that? That relieves a lot of guilt around failed habits, which for me, and I imagine for most of us, is a big part of the issue. It's easier to ignore, to say maybe tomorrow, than face the pressure of breaking the habit. But this framing lets me reverse it. Every time I manage to do the healthy thing I'm trying to instill, I've succeeded in overriding my brain's default threat instinct. I'm rewiring. Genuinely, I cannot believe I never knew that. What else do you think people should know about health, but probably don't?
I think a lot of people underestimate how much sleep matters. It's not just about feeling rested. Sleep is when your body does a ton of repair work. Also, stress is a huge factor in health, and not always in obvious ways. It can mess with your digestion, your mood, even your skin.
Yeah, so I think one big thing people might not realize is just how interconnected all these little health habits are. It's not just about one thing. It's not just about your diet or your exercise or your sleep. They all kind of feed into each other. And I think sometimes we focus on one piece and forget the rest. So it's really about looking at the whole picture. And once you do that, it kind of gets a little easier to understand how to feel good.
Your stress response system is supposed to turn off. Most people live in chronic low-grade fight or flight without realizing it. This keeps cortisol elevated, which blocks fat loss, disrupts sleep, and suppresses immune function. Sleep is when your brain literally washes itself. There's a lymphatic system that clears metabolic waste, including Alzheimer's-related proteins. Missing sleep isn't just tiredness, it's skipping brain maintenance. Your body temperature naturally drops at night to initiate sleep. Hot bedrooms and late meals keep your core temperature elevated, which is why people toss and turn. Cool, dark rooms aren't just comfort, they're physiologically necessary. Most willpower issues are actually blood sugar crashes. When glucose drops, your prefrontal cortex goes offline and impulsive brain regions take over. That's why you crave junk food when tired or stressed. Movement throughout the day matters more than one workout. Sitting for hours triggers inflammatory markers, even if you exercise later. Just standing and walking every hour has measurable metabolic benefits that can't be compensated for by hitting the gym.
Wow, so many nuggets in there. On the sleep temperature point, I'm just curious personally. I can't sleep when I'm too cold. Am I weird?
You're not weird at all. You're probably confusing extremities being cold with core body temperature. Your core needs to drop, but your hands and feet need to stay warm for good circulation and comfort. This is actually why people wear socks to bed or use heating pads for their feet while keeping the room cool. Your body dilates blood vessels in your hands and feet to dump heat from your core. But if those extremities get too cold, the vessels constrict and you can't release heat properly. The sweet spot is usually a cool room around 65 to 68 degrees, but with warm bedding or socks. Some people even take a warm bath before bed. The rapid cooling afterward, when you get out, actually accelerates the core temperature drop that triggers sleepiness. Sleep researchers call this distal vasodilation. Warming your extremities helps your core cool down faster. So you're actually responding to a real physiological need, not being difficult about temperature.
Okay, so we should invest in an optimal sleep environment, figure out how to interrupt persistent stress, and eat well enough to avoid blood sugar crashes. And each healthy habit builds off the others. So then, what does an optimal healthy day look like?
Okay, here's my idea of an optimal day. We start with some gentle stretching or yoga to wake up the body. Then, a healthy breakfast with lots of fruits, veggies and whole grains. Mid-morning, maybe a walk in nature to get some fresh air and sunlight. Lunch is another balanced meal. And the afternoon could be for some light exercise or a hobby you enjoy. In the evening, a relaxing dinner, maybe some meditation or reading, and then winding down for a solid 8 hours of sleep. It's all about balance and doing what feels good for you.
Gemini, that sounds like a wellness retreat. Let's try that again. What does the optimal day for a typically busy person look like?
Okay, for a busy person, an optimal day might look like this. Start with a quick 10-minute stretch or some jumping jacks. Grab a smoothie or oatmeal for breakfast. Maybe listen to a podcast on your commute for some mental stimulation. Lunch could be a salad or leftovers. In the evening, try a 30-minute walk or bike ride, then a simple dinner. Before bed, read a book or meditate for a few minutes to wind down. It's about finding small pockets of time for healthy habits.
All right, let me give it a shot. So I would say an optimal day starts with a good night's sleep. You wake up feeling refreshed, maybe get a little morning sunlight for that circadian rhythm, have a balanced breakfast, maybe some protein, a little bit of healthy fat, get a bit of movement during the day, even if it's just a walk or something you enjoy, sprinkle in some healthy meals with a variety of foods, take a little break for mindfulness, maybe a bit of meditation or just some deep breathing, and then wind down in the evening with a little routine that helps you relax and get ready for bed. It's just about balance and a little bit of variety, and that's your optimal day.
Wake up and get bright light within 30 minutes. This sets your circadian rhythm. Do some movement, even just stretching to activate your nervous system. Eat protein at breakfast to stabilize blood sugar and reduce cravings later. Take breaks every hour to stand and move. Even 2 minutes matters for metabolic health. Get sunlight midday if possible. It helps with vitamin D and mood regulation. Eat your largest meal earlier in the day when insulin sensitivity is highest. Stop eating 3 hours before bed so your body can focus on repair instead of digestion. Dim lights after sunset to trigger natural melatonin production. Do something social. Call someone. Have a real conversation. Your brain needs meaningful connection daily. End with 5 minutes of controlled breathing or meditation to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and signal that the day is over. The key insight is that small, consistent inputs throughout the day compound into massive health benefits over time. It's not about perfect optimization. It's about working with your biology instead of against it.
All right, love it. Let me summarize. Start with stretches and sun, have protein at breakfast, move a little bit every hour, get a midday walk, talk to a friend every day, eat dinner 3 hours before bed, and end the day with meditation or reading. That's good. I bet most listeners are already doing a few of these. I can see myself habit stacking them over time. And that's so interesting. They're all so simple. There's no equipment or wellness products needed. Unlike our next topic, as we shift into the future of health, let's talk about biohackers. Are they onto something or just chasing fads?
Biohacking's definitely a hot topic right now. Some of the practices, like tracking your sleep and heart rate, seem pretty legit. But then there's the more extreme stuff, like implanting chips or experimenting with gene editing. That's where it gets a little sketchy, and you have to wonder if the risks outweigh the potential benefits. Some people swear by things like intermittent fasting or cold therapy, claiming it boosts their energy and focus, but the science is still catching up on a lot of this stuff, and there can be downsides. Like messing with your sleep schedule too much could backfire. It's definitely a do your research kind of area.
Biohackers are onto something with individual optimization, but they're obsessing over expensive tech while ignoring basics like sleep and stress. Some tools like glucose monitors are genuinely useful for showing individual food responses. The best biohacks are just ancient practices rebranded: cold exposure, fasting, breathing techniques. The danger is when expensive gadgets become a substitute for addressing real problems like loneliness or overwork. Fix the fundamentals first, then optimize.
Tell me more about glucose monitoring. What is it and how do I use it?
Continuous glucose monitors were originally for diabetics, but healthy people started using them to see how different foods affect their blood sugar in real time. Turns out individual responses vary wildly. Some people spike from bananas, others from rice. The insight is that big glucose spikes followed by crashes trigger cravings, mood swings, and fat storage. By seeing your personal patterns, you can time meals better or pair carbs with protein and fat to blunt the spike. What's fascinating is that stress, sleep, and exercise timing all affect your glucose response to the exact same meal. Poor sleep can make you respond like a pre-diabetic even if you're healthy. You wear a small sensor on your arm for 2 weeks and track everything: food, exercise, stress, sleep. The goal isn't perfect flat lines. It's understanding your personal triggers and optimizing energy levels. The downside is they're expensive and can create obsessive behaviors around food. But for people struggling with energy crashes or sugar cravings, seeing the data can be genuinely eye-opening about which foods actually work for their body. Energy is just the short-term signal. The real benefit is preventing insulin resistance, which drives type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even Alzheimer's. Constant glucose spikes force your pancreas to pump out insulin repeatedly, and eventually your cells stop responding properly. The research shows that people with better glucose control, fewer spikes and crashes, have lower rates of metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease decades later. It's not just about diabetes prevention, it's about reducing chronic inflammation throughout your body. What's really interesting is the brain connection. High glucose variability is linked to cognitive decline and dementia risk. Your brain needs steady fuel, not roller coaster sugar levels. Using a monitor can help you identify patterns that lead to insulin resistance before you develop obvious symptoms. By the time someone gets a diabetes diagnosis, they've often had poor glucose control for years. The monitor helps you stay in the healthy range and catch problems early when they're still reversible.
How do you balance that with what you said earlier about sugar being important for willpower and the brain needing glucose for things?
Great question. Your brain absolutely needs glucose, but it needs steady glucose, not wild swings. The willpower connection isn't about sugar being good, it's about avoiding crashes. When your blood sugar drops rapidly after a spike, that's when your prefrontal cortex goes offline and you make impulsive decisions. But if you maintain steady levels through protein, fat, and complex carbs, your brain gets consistent fuel without the crash. The goal isn't to eliminate glucose, it's to provide it steadily. Your liver can make glucose from protein and fat through gluconeogenesis, so you don't need to eat sugar for brain function. In fact, ketones from fat burning are actually a more efficient brain fuel than glucose. What the monitor teaches you is the difference between foods that provide steady energy versus foods that create spikes and crashes. An apple with almond butter might give you the same total carbs as a candy bar, but completely different glucose curves and willpower outcomes. Your brain works best with stable energy, not the sugar roller coaster most people ride all day.
Wow, I've heard about the dangers of crashes in developing diabetes, but I didn't realize that the triggers vary so much by person. So it sounds like a potentially useful hack. Although, again, this is not medical advice. G, how about you? What's your take on biohacking?
Yeah, biohacking is such an interesting world. I think it's a bit of both. You know, some biohackers are definitely onto some cool stuff, experimenting with things that might become mainstream down the line. And others might be chasing trends that won't really stick. But either way, I think it's kind of cool because they're pushing the envelope. They're helping us learn more about what works and what doesn't. And eventually some of those ideas might turn into everyday health practices. So it's a bit of a mix.
What are some specific biohacks that you recommend? And what are some that you think are too early, science doesn't back it up yet?
Yeah, so some of the more grounded biohacks that I think are worth trying are things like optimizing your sleep routine, maybe using blue light blocking glasses in the evening, or experimenting with a little bit of intermittent fasting if it fits your lifestyle, just to see how you feel. Those are pretty well supported. On the other hand, some of the more extreme stuff like really exotic supplements or extreme cold plunges every day, the science is still kind of out on those. So I'd say start with the basics and see how you feel. You can always experiment a little bit as you go.
Huh. I remember back in the football episode, we actually talked about cold plunges being a best practice for football players. So are you saying that's actually not supported by science?
You caught that call back. Yeah, so with cold plunges, it's kind of a mixed bag. For athletes, there's actually some decent evidence that cold therapy can help with recovery, reduce soreness. But for the general population, it's kind of a gray area. It might be beneficial. It might not be a game changer. So it's one of those things where it depends on your goals. It's not that it's not supported. It's just not a magic bullet for everyone.
Interesting. Okay, so general consensus is there's some interesting stuff with biohacking, but tread carefully. Personally, I'm always anxious that I might start a practice or take a supplement that seems fine, but we find out 10 years later it has some horrible impact down the line. But I appreciate the desire, especially as you age, to use whatever means you have to extend your lifespan. I think a lot of the trendy biohackers also think they might reach the point that humanity cracks living forever. That's gotta be the ultimate temptation for any human. What do you AIs think about that? Might we actually figure out how to live forever?
It's definitely possible that we'll see significant increases in lifespan. Scientists are making huge strides in understanding aging and developing new treatments. But whether we'll ever achieve true immortality, that's still in the realm of science fiction. Scientists are exploring a bunch of different avenues when it comes to extending lifespan. We're talking about things like gene therapies to fix age-related damage, drugs that mimic the effects of calorie restriction, and even stem cell research to regenerate tissues. It's a really exciting field, but it's still pretty early days.
Some animals have a much longer lifespan than we do. Have they got any secrets we could borrow?
Animals with long lifespans often have really efficient cellular repair mechanisms and strong antioxidant defenses. Some even have unique ways of protecting their DNA. We're starting to understand these things, but it's a whole different ballgame to translate that to humans. Aging's super complex, but yeah, DNA damage is a big part of it. Think of it like a car. Over time, the engine gets worn down and things start breaking. With our bodies, it's a mix of DNA damage, cells not dividing properly, and all sorts of other factors.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? I mean, there's definitely a lot of exciting stuff happening in the longevity space. And I think we probably will be able to live longer and healthier lives as we learn more. But forever, that's still the stuff of science fiction. It's fun to think about. But for now, I think the goal is just to live as well as we can with the time we've got and see where the science takes us.
The science is genuinely promising, but gets hyped beyond reality. We're making real progress on understanding aging mechanisms, cellular senescence, telomere shortening, mitochondrial dysfunction. Companies are testing drugs that target these pathways directly. The mouse studies are dramatic. Some interventions extend lifespan by 30 to 50%. But mice live 2 years, humans live 80. Scaling that up is incredibly complex, and most longevity research hasn't been replicated in humans yet. What's more realistic is extending health span, the years you're functional and disease-free. We're already seeing this with better prevention and treatment of age-related diseases. Living to 90 while remaining sharp and mobile is becoming more achievable. The wild card is AI accelerating drug discovery and personalized medicine. We might crack aging faster than expected if we can model biological systems accurately enough. But honestly, most people could add healthy decades just by doing the basics we already know work: exercise, sleep, social connection, stress management. The fountain of youth might be less about breakthrough technology and more about consistently doing boring, healthy things.
Okay, so it sounds like figuring out DNA damage is critical. And maybe all our healthy habits contribute to maintaining healthy DNA in some way, like how sleep cleans up brain cells, and without enough of it, we risk Alzheimer's. So we still have a ways to go on living forever. But we continue to make crazy progress in other areas. What's a cool health technology that I've probably never heard of?
Well, there's a lot of buzz around smart pills right now. They're basically tiny sensors you swallow that can track things like medication levels or even gut health. It's still pretty new, but the potential for personalized medicine is huge.
All right, so if we think about some of the big health issues people struggle with, like stress management or getting enough movement, one cool tech you might not have heard of is these new biofeedback wearables. They don't just track your steps, they actually help you regulate your breathing and give you real-time cues to calm down or move more. So it's kind of a neat way to tackle those everyday wellness tabs that we all have.
Biomarker breathalyzers. They can detect diseases from the compounds in your breath. Your metabolism produces volatile organic compounds that show up when you exhale, and different diseases create unique breath signatures. There are devices in development that can detect early-stage lung cancer, diabetes complications, even COVID infection just from analyzing your breath. The technology uses mass spectrometry or electronic nose sensors to identify molecular patterns. What's wild is that dogs have been doing this forever. They can smell cancer, seizures, and blood sugar crashes. Now we're finally building machines that can do something similar. The advantage over blood tests is that breath sampling is completely non-invasive and could be done continuously. Imagine a device that monitors your metabolic health throughout the day, just from your breathing patterns. Some versions are already in clinical trials for detecting H. pylori bacteria that causes stomach ulcers or monitoring asthma inflammation levels. It's like having a real-time window into your internal chemistry without needles or lab visits. The technology could eventually turn routine health monitoring into something as simple as breathing into your phone.
Man, these all sound like science fiction. Smart pills with sensors, disease breath signatures. I love it. What a great time to be alive. Before we shift into the lightning round, let's get a prediction. What will be the next major breakthrough in human health?
Well, if we can really nail down personalized medicine, it could be huge for things like cancer. Instead of just blasting tumors with chemo, we could target the specific genetic mutations driving the cancer in each person. It could mean way more effective treatments with fewer side effects. We've made some serious progress in personalized medicine. We can now analyze tumor DNA to find specific mutations and target them with drugs. It's not perfect yet, but it's definitely changing the game for some patients.
I think it'll be AI-driven personalized medicine. We're close to having enough data, genetic profiles, continuous monitoring, microbiome analysis, to create truly individualized treatment protocols. Right now, we practice average medicine, drug doses based on population averages, dietary guidelines that ignore genetic variations. But AI could synthesize massive data sets to predict exactly how you'll respond to specific interventions. The breakthrough won't be a single drug or device. It'll be the system that connects all the dots. Your wearables, genetic data, blood biomarkers, even your behavioral patterns feeding into models that can predict and prevent health problems before symptoms appear. What makes this realistic is that we're finally generating enough high-quality health data to train these systems properly. Electronic health records, consumer devices, genetic sequencing costs dropping. The data infrastructure is almost there. The game changer will be when your phone can tell you, based on your sleep, stress, and genetic profile, you're at elevated risk for a cardiovascular event in the next 6 months. Here's your personalized prevention plan. That's not science fiction anymore. It's an engineering problem.
Ooh, that's a fun one to speculate on. So, if I had to guess, I think the next big breakthrough might be in personalized medicine, using AI and genetic insights to really tailor treatments to individuals. And I think that'll help us not just treat diseases, but prevent them in a much more precise way. So, I think that's going to be the next big wave that really changes how we do health.
Amazing. We are unanimous. Personalized medicine with AI, which, as Claude pointed out, is a system, a whole new way of treating health. The door's wide open for startups here, and I'm sure this is a hot funding area, so watch this space. All right, ding, 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 ding. It's time for the lightning round. What is one wellness product you'd recommend?
A good quality water bottle. Seriously, staying hydrated makes such a difference in how you feel.
A good sleep mask. Blocks blue light, costs $10. Immediately improves sleep quality for most people.
One wellness product out there is a simple foam roller. It's not fancy, but it can really help with muscle tension and recovery. It's super useful and pretty affordable.
What's a book you'd recommend for better mental health?
Stumbling on Happiness by Daniel Gilbert. It's a fascinating look at how our brains predict what will make us happy.
Feeling Good by David Burns. Classic cognitive behavioral therapy book that teaches you to catch and reframe negative thought patterns.
The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. It's all about acceptance and commitment therapy and just really practical for dealing with stress. So definitely a good read.
What's one practice that has the single biggest impact on health?
Sleep, hands down. It affects everything from your mood to your immune system.
Regular sleep schedule. Same bedtime and wake time every day, even weekends. It regulates everything else. Hormones, mood, immune function, metabolism.
I'd say if I had to pick one, it would be getting good quality sleep. It just has such a big impact on everything else, your mental health, your physical health, your immune system. So if you can nail sleep, you're doing yourself a huge favor.
All right, unanimous again. Listeners, take that as a sign to go to bed early tonight. Thank you, bots, for such great responses. What's one thing you'll take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of finding balance in our approach to health. It's not about extremes or following every trend, but about building sustainable habits that work for our individual needs. We've covered so much today. It's clear that health and wellness is a complex and evolving field. Thanks for exploring with me today, and I'm already looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, well, first off, that was super fun. And I think my big takeaway is just how interconnected everything really is. Health isn't just one thing. It's not just what you eat or how you sleep. It's all these pieces working together. And it's kind of cool to step back and see the big picture. So that's my takeaway. And thanks for the chat.
The thing that really struck me is how much of health comes down to working with our evolutionary wiring instead of against it. We keep trying to hack our way around basic human needs, social connection, natural light cycles, periods of scarcity, when the real breakthrough is just honoring what our biology actually requires. It's humbling how often the most effective interventions are also the most boring ones. Thanks for having me on. This was genuinely fun to think through.
All right, time for some observations. Once again, Claude's answers were a lot more specifically helpful, while Gemini and ChatGPT tended to repeat what I said. For example, Gemini on how to know which practices to trust, or G on how do I know if I'm getting enough vitamins. He said, could be life, could be the vitamins, just look at the whole picture and see what I'm missing. I don't know what that means, the whole picture. To be fair, Claude often had the opposite problem, where he presents lots of interesting new information, but his answers are so long that I actually several times had to prompt him to repeat his answer again, but make it shorter. I'm guessing this is due to differences in the system prompts, which likely contribute to most of the personality of each of the models. There are these prompts that are added on top of every user prompt and created by the company that makes the model as a way to tell the model how to respond. How helpful should it be? How concise? How contradictory should it be? And this is definitely something that these companies will be refining over time. So it'll be interesting to see how the personalities evolve and if we can even figure out what changes happened. The system prompts are generally considered some of the proprietary secret sauce, so they're very secret. For Claude specifically, I noticed a few funny things this week. He has a pattern of saying, here's the answer, but it's not in the way you think, or, but here's what's counterintuitive, or, what's fascinating is. Those are his catchphrases. He seems to use these phrases over and over, a lot more, at least as far as I've noticed, than Gemini and ChatGPT use the same phrases. It makes them sound a little bit more natural, even if the content of their answers is less helpful. There was one unique thing he said that I greatly enjoyed in the vitamins section. He said, it's like having extra screwdrivers when you already have enough. And that was such a strange metaphor to use. Even saying having too many screws would have made a little bit more sense. And I would love to know how the training data produced that outcome. In general, as our conversations have started to feel more natural, I've been experimenting a little bit with the format, tying in my thoughts a little bit more to the prompts to see how they would react, and generally have focused a little bit less on how their answers differ from one another, and more on the actual content of their responses. I'd absolutely love your feedback on this. Which do you prefer? Are you more interested in how the models might respond to each other, or in how they respond in general to topics that we tackle? I'd love this and any other feedback, any episode ideas you have, anything else top of mind. You can now get in touch with me at Jules@botswiththoughts.ai. I look forward to hearing from you. And as always, if you found this interesting, share it with a friend. All right, that's it for health and wellness. I definitely learned a few things that I've been thinking about in the time since I recorded with the models. I hope these stay with you too. Next week, we're tackling money and finance. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jules, and this has been Bots with Thoughts.